All right. Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for coming out and getting educated. I love that. For those who don't know me, my name is Karen St. Clair. I am the branch manager of Olympia. I also am a mentor, and I have quite a few of my mentees here in the audience, which is wonderful. I also am on Joe Simonette's team. This is Joe's office, Northwest Home Experts. And Joe's amazing. He's a great resource. We just love having him around. And then Mary over here is also on our team. So we always like to let people know that EXP is wonderful and we love it, but it's virtual, right? Sometimes we need some personal interaction. So we always want to make sure that people know that we are here. We love having people come in, ask questions, sit around. I always encourage people to come in and listen to conversations that are going on around you. My first few years in the industry, that's how I learned a lot of stuff. I eavesdropped on everybody. I wanted to know what they were saying. So it's a great way to learn. So, you're more than welcome to stop in anytime, and we would love to have you here. So everybody has probably heard about the forms changes, I'm hoping. You may not know exactly what that means in your world. Really, it's not a huge deal. We have been kind of dealing with this situation for a while as far as just getting the information out. When we started with the MLS change, it's probably been, gosh, I want to say it was 2019 when they posted the buyer brokers commission. And this all started, if you're not aware, with several lawsuits back east that are still ongoing regarding buyers and sellers basically saying, hey, we didn't really understand what this meant. Buyers are saying, hey, you don't give us a choice that we have to pay this commission, but you have been telling us that, oh, don't worry, sellers are paying the commission. But we all know that's not true. The purchase prices are based on the inclusion of the commission in that total amount. So MLS has been proactive in trying to get ahead of whatever the results of the lawsuit is. That is why they started the changes back then and have done a lot of the forms updates, which there's some great updates that I'm super excited to share with you. So I think it's all good. I think some people are kind of, I mentioned Y2K. For those of you who remember, everybody panicked, right? Oh my God, it's the end of the world. I've heard a lot of that from some agents, and don't panic. What it is that you're going to have to brush up on your skills on having that conversation with your buyers on how you get paid. On the listing side, we don't have a problem, I would hope, discussing how we get paid and discussing commission. But for some reason, when we're working with buyers, we never want to talk about it. Well, I like to get paid. I mean, I love my job, but I wouldn't show up if I didn't get paid. So this is just going to help you brush up on your ability to have that conversation. So I've got all the forms. Well, I shouldn't say all. There was a couple I left out because I think these are the most important that are going to affect your drafting of your contracts right away. I have highlighted everything. So of course, the first one is Form 21. The biggest note is we've added a line. And what does that say? It is where we're going to be putting in what is the offered commission from the buyer or from the seller that's on the listing. So we're disclosing that. So I'm hoping that you're having the conversation with your buyer before you start writing a contract. Because when your buyer goes to sign it, they're going to be going, whoa, you get paid $15,000 or X percent? What does that mean? I'm the one that found the house, I just had you write the offer. How come you're getting paid so much? Hopefully you have that conversation and can provide the reason of your value well before this comes up. Now you guys will notice that there is an other box to the far right and it says see addendum. And we're going to cover this form. But what this is so if you have a 41C, which you all should, which is a buyer agency agreement where you have discussed your value and how you get paid and have executed this agreement, this is where you're negotiating with your client. And so let's say I'm working with clients who like to look at auction properties or new construction. Now, for those of you who've been around a little while, we've noticed some of our new construction people are offering 1% commission. Yay, great, thanks so much. So I want to negotiate with my buyer, say, I usually, my commission's 2.5% or my commission's 3%. So if the seller's not offering that 2.5 or 3%, I'm going to need you to pay the rest of it. So that's where this is going to come into play, because you're going to have already negotiated what your charge is with your client. Now, of course, as a buyer's agent, I'm going to try and negotiate with the seller to get them to pay the whole thing, right? I'm going to get them to put a little more skin in the game. But, I think making sure that you understand the form and being able to explain it to your client is going to eliminate most of the issues. Listings, and, and I would ask, like Mary and Joe, most of the time, do you get any pushback when you're discussing a listing in agreement with somebody on what your commission rate is? Or do they even discuss it? They just don't bring it up, right?
No.
Right, right. And the same thing is going to be on the buyer side. If you are articulating your value, it's very rare you're going to have pushback. People understand you want to get paid, right? I don't go to my dentist and go, yeah, I just didn't like the service, so I'm not paying you. No, I'm probably going to pay. So that's the easiest change that we've got. So the next one, 41C. So there have been some really great changes on this form, which I was super excited about when Justin went over them. So talking about where we're going to negotiate with the seller to pay the difference, that's going to be that first highlighted where it says additional buyer brokerage firm compensation. So this is where we're going to negotiate with our buyer saying, hey, if you want to look at all these homes and they're only offering 2%, my rate's 3%, you're going to have to make up that difference. The next two sections are new, which I really appreciate. So has anybody ever done a credit to your buyer from your commission for their closing cost? Yep, absolutely. A lot of people have. So what this does, this section allows us to reduce our B&O tax. So before, you were still getting charged B&O tax on your entire amount. And I don't know if anybody realized that. So by doing this, we're going to be paying, if you're giving a credit, you're not paying taxes on that credit that is going to your client, which, every little bit helps, especially when they're constantly trying to raise it. Now, one of the things to point out is when you are completing this section, you want to fill in either the percentage or the dollar amount. You do not want to fill in both. You are going to just do one or the other. Now, the second new section is reduction in the buyer brokerage firm compensation. So this is where, and I've done it before, and it's a little challenging sometimes if the other agent you're negotiating with doesn't understand what you're trying to do. You're trying to say, you've offered a 3% commission, for example, and I'm willing to give 1% of my commission back to the seller so that I can help make my buyer's offer look better. That's where you can do this. So this spells out that 1% is going back to the seller. Because if you don't have that clarity, guess who it's going to? The listing agent. Because that's per the original listing agreement. So I like that, that clarification on there as well. So now, Form 41. This is a brand new form. So most of you are probably familiar with the Form 41A, which has been our standard buyer's agency agreement, but it has the opportunity for an exclusive or a non-exclusive on there. This one is just an exclusive buyer agency agreement. And this is where we can really start negotiating for ourselves and prove our value. So the first section, Section A, we have compensation from the seller. So if the compensation is equal to or greater than the amount above, the buyer is going to accept the offer of compensation. So this is where we're going to negotiate that, if the seller's offering 2.5%, then great. The buyer's agent is just going to take that. Or if the buyer needs to kick in an additional amount in Section B. Now, this was something that I've never personally done, and maybe people do. You can filter listings by the commission that's offered. I've never done it because it's not something that has ever been in my wheelhouse. Whatever my clients want to see, I take them. But you can agree with your buyer that if there is a minimum percent that you will accept and the buyer is not going to make up the difference, the buyer can say, well, then just don't show me anything that's below 2% commission. So in section C, you can add, for example, no listings under 1% commission. And that buyer is agreeing that just don't bother showing me houses unless their commission meets your rate, which is interesting. I don't know. We'll see how that goes. One of the minor changes that they made was to a timeline, so the tail period. And they've done this on both the buyer agency agreement and the listing agreement. So previously we had a 180-day default of after a relationship was terminated, that if the buyer put in an offer on or the seller sold to somebody that was brought to them during that agreement, that the agent would earn their commission. So they have actually added it. The default is still 180 days, but you can negotiate. So you can negotiate that timeline with your buyer or seller and say, you know, okay, 30 days after you terminate, after that, then you're good. I don't know why you would, but all right. Oh, and one more point. We've had this discussion quite a bit. I actually have run across it recently with a buyer's agent who was trying to negotiate the difference. The seller was only offering 2% commission. Buyer's agent wanted to get paid 3%. Unfortunately, it was a VA loan. So she had executed a buyer agency agreement with the buyer saying, I get paid 3%, but unfortunately on a VA loan, buyers cannot contribute anything towards commission. So that is where you're going to have to negotiate with the seller to bring that up. Now, obviously, how you would do that is you're going to, hopefully, you're going to increase the purchase price is one way to do it. Now, of course, we all know that in this shifting market, appraisals are going to start to become an issue. So being aware of that and planning for that and making sure that you're prepared for whatever that difference is going to look like. I know there's probably a lot of people around here that do a lot of V8 transactions. So it is one that your negotiating skills will come in handy. All right. So now on the exclusive sale and listing agreement. So how many people have messed up filling up their compensation and basically made it so they weren't going to get paid on their listing agreement? Yeah, come on, people, you know you did. So I'm hoping maybe that this change will make it a little clearer. We'll see. Because everybody's like, oh, so I want, you know, I'm getting 2.5% and you're getting 2.5%. So that's the way we split it, right? Unfortunately, no. It was I think poorly written in my opinion. So I'm hoping that the update to the compensation will make it clearer. And they've kind of broken it out in subcategories. So we have our listing firm compensation. Now we have right below it, what does that look like if there's an unrepresented buyer that comes into? A lot of times you'll see on a listing where a listing agent will say, you know, 3% commission, 2%, you know, if the listing agent brings the buyer, right? So they've negotiated with the seller already that they will take a lower commission if they bring the buyer. Unrepresented buyer, EXP doesn't really allow that. If you are, you know, because really the theory is anybody truly unrepresented? You're going to be helping them. You're going to be doing something for them. And so really you are representing them. So I don't know that that's really going to come into play for any EXP agent because the brokerage team really wants, you know, buyer agency agreement if you are on both sides. And so in the buyer brokerage firm compensation, we've got the whole nother section and it addresses the dual agency, which is great. So that if I get both sides, I'll give you a break because it's a little easier for me, right? So I'm hopeful that that allows a little more flexibility within the listing agreement and spells it out. quite a few of these changes are things that Charlie and I particularly have been writing on Form 34s for many years. I am really glad that we're not doing that anymore. It makes us very uncomfortable to write verbiage on a 34. It's like I tell I try to remember to tell all my mentees, you know what, if you're picking up a 34, you should have already picked up the phone and called me. Please don't do it. And the other thing that we do, which is always a great good practice, is if you do feel the need that you need to write something on a Form 34, hand it to somebody who has no idea what you're doing in your transaction and ask them if it makes sense. If they go, I got no clue what this means, probably need to revisit your verbiage. Okay. And then let's see, on the next page is again that flexible tail period on the expiration of the listing term. So in a nutshell, I think most of the changes are going to provide clarity and the ability to have a little more flexibility in our contracts, but have it spelled out very clearly. I'm hoping that for our clients, it's easier to understand. It's difficult if we don't understand it and we can't explain it. So I encourage anybody who wants to talk over more things, you know, after we leave here, if you go, okay, wait, explain this to me again, give me a call. I'm happy to talk about it. I think it's super important that we understand our contracts. It helps bring value to our clients. You know, we're the professional. We should know what we're doing and how to explain it. It's difficult sometimes. Sometimes it's like, oh, I know I took this class. What was it again? I do that all the time. Annie. I Google Annie. So does anybody have any questions? Yes, Charlie. Yes.
Checkbox dollars, checkbox percent, and under the line it says amount offered in the listing.
Yes.
And that sounds like the same as pay as offered. And so if the listing offers 2.5% and I want to do 2.5%, am I going to put the checkbox for percent and type 2.5, or am I going to hit pay as offered?
So if you are not planning on negotiating any additional commission amount with your client on a 41C, go ahead and put pay as offered. But if you are negotiating, let's say 3% is what I've negotiated with my client, but the listing is only offering 2.5, you're going to want to mark that first box and put in the 2.5% as well as the other. You check both, yes, because you want to make sure that they're referencing the 41C that's going to be in play there, because yeah, yes, I know we can, yay.
One more, mostly this is for clarification.
Yes,
We
yeah.
already talked about it, but two parts to this. One, when does this go into effect
Okay.
fully? And what happens to contracts that are already?
Great questions. I did make those notes on my other paper that I left in the office. Great questions, because those are important. So these contract changes go into effect October 3rd. All of your existing stuff does not need to be redone. Just starting from anything October 3rd moving forward is when you will use the new contracts. Anything that's existing is just fine. So great question. Thank you. I was like, I got to remember to ask that. Yeah, yes, for sure. No, it's important. Important. Yeah. Oh, I need to wash that window. I just noticed there's fingerprints all over it. Sorry. Yes. Okay. You would. Yeah, you would still negotiate that on your buyer agency agreement. Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. And a lot of people do, you know, and as well as on the listing side. Yeah. Well, it's going to be an additional charge. So, I mean, I would, yeah, absolutely. You want to cover that, but so that they get the full picture of how much actually you're making. Yeah. That's the biggest thing, you know, just disclosing. That's, you know.
And is that, Karen, going under, just to kind of piggyback on her, is that going now on the 41 under section 5 there with the check boxes? Would we still, because before we were doing other,
Right.
and then listing
Right.
our terms.
Yeah, so you're gonna put it on the 41C
Okay.
in other, yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, because then you're making it also part of the contract, so escrow can, you know, see that as well. Yeah. Yeah.
Their default. Form 41 for the section A compensation seller, second paragraph. It says like any amount of compensation offered by the seller that is greater than the above amount shall be, and there's like 4 options, but it doesn't say which one is default, so if you don't click any,
Oh, yeah, there is no default.
so you have.
You need to check one.
fail.
Yeah. Yeah, well, then you may not get paid, which was one of Annie's recent videos, is making sure that you understand that making sure you understand that if you don't complete this and for some reason the seller is not offering a commission, you aren't going to get paid, right? But we know that this market's shifting. We know that sellers are, hopefully listing agents are going to have that conversation with sellers that, you know, this is what we need to do to get a buyer's agent to your property to sell. You know, when this first went into effect, I remember probably, and I don't know how many Joe and Mary saw, I probably saw less than a handful of listings that had a 0% commission. It was a very, very small amount. And that was one of the big concerns, is that, oh, well, sellers just aren't going to put anything on there at all, right? And I think that that was something that ended up really not being an issue, because pretty quickly they figured they weren't competing, right? Because everybody else is like, well, we want to get the house sold. And in this shifting market, we know listing agents are getting a little bit more loose with their negotiation. They're a little bit more flexible because they, you know, they may get one offer. You know, we're coming out of, it's a good time for this to happen. Let's say this would not have been good to roll out last year. This wouldn't have worked. So I'm glad they waited a little bit. Yeah.
I missed what
Yeah.
section you.
Oh, that would be, section A.
Section A5 compensation.
Section A, second paragraph. There's like 4 checkboxes.
Yeah.
Line
So
30.
this is if there's, so let's say I've negotiated with my buyer that, you know, 2.5%. Now, let's say they get under contract on a listing that's 3%. This section is going to say what happens with that 0.5%. Does it go back to the seller? Does it go to the buyer's agent? Who does that go to? So that's what that section is referencing, is where does that extra money go? So, you know, let's see. So you could either pay it to the buyer brokerage firm, which goes to the buyer's agent. You can credit it to the buyer. So if there's excess over 2.5, you can say, hey, buyer, I'm going to give you the excess for your closing costs, or credit it back to the seller or another. Now, one of the interesting things was, and I know that EXP won't be doing this, but they have basically said that companies can write their own listing agreements. We don't have to use the MLS. I don't see that EXP is changing that. But, you know, that being said, I always imagine that there's going to be some brokerages out there, because we see them all the time, that have created all their own forms that they like to use. And just being prepared to have that conversation, that we can't advise our clients on those forms or those agreements. So I think it's a challenge. Most of them, I think most people will probably stick with the MLS forms, but every once in a while people like to get creative. So I don't like to get creative. I like to follow the rules. I am not creative. All right. Anybody have any other questions on these? And then any other questions on anything else that's, you know, that's going on? Anything burning information you want to know? Any upcoming things you would like to see? I know that I've talked to quite a few agents recently that are really looking for more interaction, more opportunity to meet with other agents, whether EXP or outside. So I know Anastasia has been doing meetups, but if anybody has any other ideas of things that they would like to see, let me know. We've got a ton of partners, lender partners, title and escrow, that are always looking for opportunity to provide value to us and snacks. So, if anybody has anything that they're really interested in seeing, let me know because I'm happy to arrange it.
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah.
We will be having another networking event. We're aiming to do one here in probably now a little over 30 days out, I would say. 45. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I thought it was great. I went to the last one. It was nice to see some affiliates, and I do know, I got a notice this morning from Robin Chase with Realtors that the Realtor affiliate showcase is coming up in October. It's going to be at Thurston County Fairgrounds. So, another opportunity to meet a lot of our, industry partners and create connections if you don't have specific people that you work with. So yeah, and it's supposed to be a circus theme. So
oh,
yeah, they always come up with a fun theme. So yeah, absolutely. So yeah, yeah,
it is gonna be a
yes, it is. It is. It is. So anything else? Okay, so we can stop. Yes. So are so welcome. Now I do.